Welcome everybody to the weekly call of the source code group. And I'll go straight to the agenda. So the first one was for Joe, so we can skip it. I can talk to him asynchronously about 16.3 planning. The other point I had was sort of like something we've been thinking a lot about and discussing things on the code review side of things. So essentially, we've been running into performance problems on the merge requests and the diff generation for a long time. We've had epics to break it down, iterations to bring TBT down, iterations to break the request into multiple batches, a bunch of things, right, for performance reasons. What we've realized is that with the current approach of having everything be a view app, we're always going to get so far, right? So we've been discussing and trying out some crazy ideas. One of them that we're currently exploring is server-side rendering. Try to see where that. I'll try to find an issue for it that we have open. Stanislav is investigating an approach, but the topic goes beyond that. So what I basically want to like just disclose here is that the way we see this going forward is the code review diffs and the source code diffs, they are different to a point because one's merge, one is just browsing the repository, the other is in the merge request context, but the render of the diff itself should be easily made consistent if we use the same code base. That's going to be our target, is whatever comes next for code review will span source code as well, right? So this isn't necessarily like a product change, it's more of like an engineering based change, because the outcome of it will just be a consistent experience of diffs across source code and code review. Now, what this entails is a lot of technical hurdles in the back, but the idea is to make the code much more maintainable and much more easy to work with and much more performant from the get-go, given all the lessons we've been taking. In technical terms, what this will mean is front end will have to be reworked, but the back end will also have to be reworked. Essentially, right now we're using custom endpoints on the code review side of things. We have an endpoint that's not even API, not public API. It's like an internal endpoint that we're using, so it's not ideal. So we definitely want to make all of these things be repurposed into a much more performant perspective. And yeah, so from the front end, that's going to be reworked. We have a bunch of ideas on how we can potentially go about that. From the back end, I'm a little bit blind on what needs to be reworked to make diffs work both for source code and code review, because they're different in the representation of the back end. I know that at least the code review, there's a cache in the table of the diff itself. I don't think that happens in the repository. So it will be interesting to eventually we're going to start to have conversations around idealizing an architecture for this. So I do expect these topics to come into our pond very soon. Yeah, that's pretty much like the pitch, right? Where we are right now. We're evaluating the front end architecture, including some Ruby rendered server-side render templates, which would then go over to, all right, how do we cache these? How do we make these fast? How can we make these cached in a way that doesn't burst the Redis cluster and all that stuff? So it's going to be a lot of crossover between backend and front end and between source code and code review. So I'll leave it at that. Does that sound good to everybody? Do you have any questions or ideas that spark any ideas?
Sorry, I was kind of late, so I missed the first half. But is there any issues you could link to that we could read through?
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to find. I with this very last minute, as you know, the agenda was ending.
Yeah.
I'll add something. So right now we have an ongoing spike that Stanislav on the code review side of things is investigating server-side rendering of diffs, employing some front-end techniques. Just move this, try to find the issue that he has assigned. So this should make it easy. Yes. I can share the screen real quick. This is the issue that we are addressing. I think he has a merge requests links. Yes, there's a draft there. It's still not ready to be picked apart yet, but if you want to take a look more or less, what's the kind of things he's doing in the front end and the back end, he's probably a good place to start. He has some changes here just to make things available. He's using the Haml templates that we're using in the source code side of things just to test it, just to get it started. But it's definitely going to be like a major change in how we serve the data, and this is not going to be the code we ship. It's just an exploration.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'll take a look at that later.
Will be being investigated. But I'll find an epic that I think we have an epic for these things. There's no epic yet. I know we have an epic for the performance because I created some of these. So if you can just entertain me for a little bit. I know that I created a bunch of like refactors. Commits list. So that's the commit list. There you go. Okay, so this is probably like a start, but there's not a lot of stuff in here. Yeah, there's not a lot of stuff in here, but I'll show you either way in case we want to start talking about things. But I just want to like to at least get this on your minds in the backend side of things. And there's potentially a lot of questions between code review and source code that we need to clarify how we're going to do that. But especially given that Torsten is stepping out of the scope after this milestone planning, I think it's important for us to understand that even without a lot of work coming from product, there's a lot of stuff we can clean the house from the engineering perspective. So wanted to share that with you three here on the call, but everybody's watching the recording as well. I'll keep you posted. That's it. If nobody has any other comments or questions, I'll hand it off to Amy.
Okay,
Right.
sorry, I was typing. So as far as I know, Joe is still speaking to me, so thank you. The reason I wanted to bring
What did
up,
you do, Amy?
I finished my OKR. So
Oh, that piece of NMR. Got it.
yeah, that beast. The kind of tutorials they want to, my managerial team wants to see us write, they span multiple groups, they span multiple stages. And I realize since I represent source code and code review, I have an opportunity to write tutorials on the really, really early part of the adoption process. And then I realized nobody had written up, okay, so how do you set up groups? How do you set up protections on a new project? And I handed over an MR to Joe that literally said things like, I know this subheading is wrong. Ask me what I know about group inheritance. Nothing. So we got it dealt with. We know what I know what I have to do in the next round of reviews or next round of improvements, but I wanted to call that out here because I know this was a pain in the butt to review. And I also know that it required him to look up stuff that he wasn't super familiar with. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, it was great. So thanks for the opportunity. It was good. I like stuff too.
There's probably going to be more of this. I don't know what exactly I need to focus on. I'll deal with that next quarter. I just got to get this one published first. So from time to time, big MRs like that are going to show up. I'll try to split them between code review and source code, but source code got this one for a reason. It was mostly because of all the changes to code owners. I wanted to make sure that the person who had been working on them could look at what I wrote and said, yes, that knowledge is based in how this worked a year ago. Nice try. So that's that. The other is a little bit of knowledge that I mostly poked code review with yesterday, but I'm going to bring it up here. when you add stuff to the UI, you should probably check the accessibility for it. Cause I ran one of my accessibility tools over the merge request page yesterday, and I had a moment of I need to go talk to some people. So I've poked some folks who I think can help resolve a few of the specific problems that we've introduced, but I figured I'll just mention the tool that one of the tools that I use to check accessibility on the front end. And if you're not familiar with it, I'm happy to show it to you. Ah, I see Andre is talking.
Yes, funny you should mention this.
Yay.
So one of the things that we already discussed, we're also very mindful that accessibility is very horrible. I remember when we were in Cape Town and Contribute, we had a session where we used like a blind, like a opaque pair of glasses. I mean, we have several front-end engineers try to use the platform. It wasn't good then. It's not better now.
No.
We don't have that as concern. I know that some people are really invested and have made a lot of changes, so that's really appreciated. But yes, accessibility works best when it's there from the day one. So
Yeah.
We definitely want to make sure that this is part of like the direction of where we're going with the refactor of the diffs to make
Awesome.
it like easier to navigate, easy to work with, easy to switch context, but also to not just assistive technology that reads the screen readers, but also there's a lot of stuff that we can do to benefit the accessibility of motor impaired users, but also that benefits everybody. Like the size of the controls, the way that we have provide a way to navigate on the page. So a lot of that stuff will end up there. So we'll have those discussions on with the designers and all that stuff, but that'll be part of the project for sure. Of course, I don't know. We won't impact the blog page, I think. So we're still going to have to probably like do some revisions there. So what I would say is, especially the repository and the blog page, I would definitely encourage creating issues around improvements that we can ship.
Okay.
The other pages, they're so behind that they're probably going to pick up by a refactor, and the refactor will take care of those. But for the other
Okay.
ones, issues galore.
Okay, I can do that.
Pat.
Yeah, it's a late question about the whole diffs changes. So I don't know if I should ask it later, or is Emmy done, or
I'm
Go ahead.
never done. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's to know actually. I've never worked with the diffs so far. Is to know actually what you think is gonna be needed. Do you think we need to? So we need to create a public API, you think, and it should work for both, or the current API just work for? We got two APIs for two type of diffs somehow. Like I don't know.
I can share some ideas of what we know so far.
Mhm.
One of the things that has helped the front-end apps as a whole is the ability to request different things at different times in different shapes. So I can give you an example. On the merge request, you can request the diffs all at once. We can
Mhm.
also have a file-by-file navigation. So the API being extensible, being adaptable, definitely it's a hint for GraphQL. That we can have an endpoint that we can request things on our own, and we can specify exactly how we want the data to come through. That's definitely going to be part of the equation, I think. I don't think we can get around that. But more than that, one of the things we've noticed is if you want something performant, someone just dropped the wallet there. Want something performant, we need to have something built for purpose. So one of the things we're talking about having is a priority of constituents, what's going to be like the most important things on that project. And a lot of the times it won't be as consistent as the other typical apps. When we're talking about diffs, we're talking about lots of data to the page, lots of interactivity, lots of memory usage on the front end browser, respective of things. So we might cut some corners that are not obvious for the rest of the applications. That's why I want to devise an architecture around this thing. But I do expect some form of API, potentially GraphQL, for getting diffs. Now, in the repository side of things, it will be the diffs on a branch or diffs on a commit or diffs comparing two branches on the compare page, for example. And then on the merge request, it will be essentially comparing one branch with the other, which is kind of like the compare. So because you can see there's already differences here.
Yeah.
Is it a commit that is we have it in Git, or is it a comparison of two branches? And in the case of merge requests, what we're doing is comparing your branch with the head of the target branch. So it's constantly moving.
Mhm.
So just on the back end, there's going to be an engine around this, sorting out and abstracting a lot of this complexity to give, this is important, the same response to the front end, the same format, the same payload, the same verbiage, all of that consistently across all these scenarios. Right now, we don't have that.
No, it's not the case. It's different.
Yeah,
verbiage and
very
different
different.
format for okay.
Not even a public API that we're using on the merge request. So that's going to be like the first conversation we need to have. But then here's the kicker. I'm not entirely convinced that the entirety of the data will come as a JSON or GraphQL from the server in an AJAX request.
Mhm.
Perhaps some parts of these will come pre-server side rendered from the backend. Okay.
Okay.
But they have to come consistent in a way that then the front end can hydrate the UI and add functionality as it needs. So for example, the way we're thinking about this, if you can find a way to render the HTML of a diff consistently on the back end, it gets to the front end, and then we can just attach things to that UI depending on the use case. That's one way to go. But we need to make sure that it's super fast, regardless of whether the caches are warm or the caches are not warm. So yeah, there's gonna be a lot of conversations around this.
Got you.
Yeah. And then on the front end, we have conversations around, is it a view app? Is it something that gets like custom elements, like native elements on the page? Then we hydrate it as we go, and we then add view functionality so we can reuse other components on the page. We have talked about doing something like a client-side cache store that the backend talks to that cache, and then the front end always renders from cache from the client side. But then what that will do is like we will start spreading the data through the client side on every merge request you visit. Is that sustainable? We need to check. So there's a bunch of like questions around that. But what we want to do, so one of the things we want to question is whether getting a line by line from the server is the most effective way to getting the diffs. Because
Yeah.
right now we get a structure of like diff files, and there's an array of lines, and each line has a bunch of structure, right? It's such a heavy payload to repurpose that into a front end compared to getting a blob of text and dumping it on a div, right? Now we have a blob of text, we don't have lines broke up. How can we reconcile these two scenarios here and having the front end talk to the back end in a way that, hey, I want to attach a comment to this line. So there's a bunch of like stuff that we're still going through and trying to identify. We already have some clues about what works and what doesn't work from the code review side of things. We're not ready to set an architecture plan yet. That's what I'm talking about to you right now, is so that when we start those conversations, source code will need to be part of that, to make sure that we're consistent and then we serve both purposes.
Okay. Got you. I had a question about
that
Hotwire.
helps.
I had a question about Hotwire, but it's probably not a solution for it's gonna be a mess at architecturally, I think. I don't know if you know about Hotwire, like server-side rendering for Rails.
I heard about HTML over the wire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of my engineers talked to me about that. He mentioned that I think I've seen that. The way that I usually see these things is like they're very basic to how they get to. I remember TurboLinks having a bunch of like benefits, but then he fell short once we have already like a complex front-end app to build upon it. But yeah, we can look at all those things. To me, the way that we get the HTML to the browser is the least critical one. To me, the harder part is how do we get the data from Gitly to HTML rendered. Like that journey to me is much more critical because it needs to be super fast, it needs to be super efficient, and
Okay.
then if you think about server-side rendering, remember if the the user has opted for parallel view or inline, server-side render diffs need to be accounted for that. So
Yeah.
we probably gonna need two different versions for each diff, right? So when we start forecasting the capacity of caching, cache stores and stuff, and merge requests and diffs, it's a very highly usage area. We don't want to throw down the infrastructure of Redis. So
Okay. Got you.
if you
Thank
have
you.
ideas, share it on the epic that I gave you, and then I linked in the agenda, and we can start from there. And eventually,
Yeah.
want to start having conversations more formally about architecture, about this around these things. But yes, at the moment, it's just a hint of what's potentially coming in the next months.
I don't think I'm gonna be a big help. Like I said, I never worked on diffs, but I will definitely check it out.
Well,
I will
you
have
have the
some time
benefit.
on
You
my-
have the benefit of fresh eyes, Pat. Don't
That's true.
discount that. So I'm happy to hear thinking outside of the box and
Okay.
that sort of thing. So,
Problem.
and then you can always ask great questions that will get us to think. So
Definitely interested though. Definitely interested. I will check it out.
cool. I'm glad. Any other comments, questions on Amy's topic as well? Accessibility. You want to read your comment, Amy? That's an
Oh.
important one.
Yeah, and it's actually relevant to me right now. Somebody, okay, my best friend who is hearing impaired reminded me as I'm getting ready for my surgery, the lack of disability is temporary. And I'm feeling that right now because I got 2 more weeks.
Yeah,
and
no,
then I
yeah,
get full
exactly.
use of my hand back. So yeah.
It's a great thought, and a lot of the times people think that you only become aware of the lack of accessibility when you need it. You might need it tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? And it's especially important when we're talking about motor impairments. Like if you have a hand, yeah, we've all been there. RSI, yeah, I have that too. So a lot of the times, like we feel it, then we become aware of that. So it's important for us to have that empathy about the disabilities we don't have right now. We could have them, so might as well just prepare the future for everybody. It is important to distinguish two things, though. There's the screen reader accessibility, which can benefit from very careful markup, but a lot of like visual users don't benefit from that. So the effort in the markup isn't the whole thing. There's stuff like the Fitts law that tells you that the bigger the target, the easier it is to acquire. So the bigger the buttons, the more comfortable they are. And a bunch of other things we can do to make their lives easier. So yeah, we're very big supporters of accessibility in this point. So sometimes we just don't do it because the code base is so convolutedly broken and so legacy that it will be a huge effort. But sometimes it isn't. We just need to schedule the work. So issues are helpful, and then on the refactor, we'll definitely pay attention to that topic. Thanks for bringing it up, Amy. All right, we're at time. Any last minute things? Joe, since I have you here, should we get a call scheduled for the next couple of days or so to go through the 16.3 planning? How do you want to do that?
Yeah, so I do have one scheduled with Torsten. I think it's
Right.
tomorrow.
Okay.
But yeah, I have to go and pick up my daughter. But after that, I'll come back and let's have a chat and schedule something.
So tomorrow, all right, I'll take a look at your calendars and see where we can
Yeah.
fit something. Because usually what we do is this, like backend has a call with Torsten, frontend has a call with Torsten. Backend and frontend don't really have one. But in the case like you're sitting in for Sean, if I can help in any way, I can sit in on that call with Torsten, and then we can
Yeah,
I
that'd be
can
cool.
have a separate call with Torsten. I'll take a look at the calendars if I can make it.
Cool. Okay, thank you. All right,
All right.
speak later.